You've already decided who this person is. Not after knowing them, before that, much earlier, before the conversation ended, before the facts arrived, before the evidence showed up. Maybe it was their voice, maybe it was their posture, maybe it was their smile, maybe it was their clothes, maybe it was their confidence, maybe it was something you can't even name anymore. But your brain noticed it and made a prediction, fast, automatic, invisible. This person is smart. This person is trustworthy. This person knows what they're doing. The prediction happened first. The evidence came later. And that's where the real problem begins. Because once your brain makes a prediction, it starts looking for proof. Not proof that the prediction is wrong, proof that it's right. Every joke lands differently. Every mistake looks smaller. Every success feels bigger. Every new piece of information gets pulled toward the same conclusion. And the strange part? It doesn't feel like bias. It feels like observation. It feels like you're learning who they are, when often you're watching your first impression expand. That's not intuition. That's not insight. That's the halo effect. And it quietly shapes how you see almost everyone you meet. Watch what happens when someone sounds certain. Not informed, not accurate, certain. They speak quickly. They hesitate less. They answer immediately. They rarely say, "I'm not sure." And something changes. Not in them, in you. The room becomes quieter. Questions become fewer. Challenges become softer. Agreement becomes easier. Nobody announces it. Nobody votes on it. But confidence starts collecting authority. The strange part? Your brain treats confidence like evidence, even though they are completely different things. A person can be confident and wrong. A person can be uncertain and right. You already know this, yet your brain keeps forgetting. Because certainty feels true. That's the trap. When someone sounds sure, part of your brain assumes they already did the work. They already checked the facts. They already solved the problem. They already know something you don't. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it isn't. The halo effect doesn't care. It sees confidence, then quietly adds competence. So the loudest voice gets remembered. The strongest delivery gets rewarded. The boldest answer gets trusted. Meanwhile, someone else sits across the room, thinking longer, speaking carefully, admitting uncertainty, considering alternatives. And because they sound less certain, they sound less capable, even when they aren't. Over time, this becomes expensive, not financially, cognitively. You start selecting confidence over accuracy, delivery over substance, certainty over evidence. And eventually, some of the most influential people in your life aren't the most correct. They're simply the people who never sounded unsure. That's the confidence tax. Everyone pays it. Most people never notice it. Now, the second trap. This one is quieter and much harder to see. You notice one thing, just one. They're attractive, they're successful, they're warm, they're funny, they're intelligent. That's all it takes. Your brain receives one signal, then starts writing a story. Successful becomes wise. Warm becomes trustworthy. Confident becomes competent. Attractive becomes admirable. One trait becomes 5, 5 become 10, and suddenly you aren't looking at a person anymore. You're looking at a character. The strange part is that it feels real. It feels discovered. It feels obvious, but often you're not seeing who they are. You're seeing who your brain expects them to be. That's why contradictory information feels uncomfortable. A person you admire makes a mistake. Your brain rushes to explain it. They're stressed. They didn't mean it. There's probably context. A person you dislike does something admirable. The opposite happens. They got lucky. They're pretending. It doesn't count. Same evidence, different interpretation. Because the halo effect doesn't just shape what you notice, it shapes what you're willing to believe. Most people think the halo effect creates admiration. Sometimes it creates blindness. You don't just add positive qualities, you stop seeing contradictory ones. And eventually, you're no longer evaluating reality, you're defending a picture. A picture created from fragments, a picture built from assumptions, a picture your brain drew before the evidence arrived. It's like reading a mystery novel after someone spoiled the ending. Every chapter becomes confirmation. Every clue points in the same direction. Every surprise becomes harder to see. Because the story was decided long ago. So where does this come from? Why does the brain do this? To answer that, we have to go back more than 100 years. A psychologist named Edward Thorndike noticed something strange. In 1920, he asked military officers to evaluate their soldiers, not in one category, in several. Leadership, intelligence, character, physical ability. Different traits, different questions, different judgments, or at least they were supposed to be. Because something unexpected happened. When an officer liked a soldier in one category, they tended to like them in every category. A physically impressive soldier was often rated as smarter. A smart soldier was often rated as a better leader. A respected soldier was often rated as having stronger character, even when there wasn't enough evidence to support those conclusions. One positive impression kept spreading, like ink in water. Thorndike gave this phenomenon a name, the halo effect. But here's the important part. The officers weren't being irrational, they were being human. Because the brain doesn't naturally evaluate people one trait at a time. It prefers stories. A story is cheaper. A story is faster. A story requires less effort than uncertainty. Later researchers discovered something similar. When we meet someone, our brain doesn't build a spreadsheet. It builds a character, a model, a prediction, a narrative. And once that narrative exists, the missing pieces start filling themselves in. Think about how quickly this happens. You hear someone speak, you notice their posture, you see their expression, and within seconds, your brain starts answering questions nobody asked. Are they smart? Can they be trusted? Are they competent? Do they belong? The strange thing is that these answers arrive before the evidence. That's why first impressions feel so convincing. Not because they're always right, because they're generated so quickly that they feel automatic, and what feels automatic often feels true. The halo effect survives because it usually works well enough. Most of the time, confidence does correlate with competence. Most of the time, warmth does correlate with trustworthiness. Most of the time, successful people are skilled at something. The shortcut isn't completely wrong. That's why it's dangerous. If it failed all the time, you'd notice it. Instead, it succeeds just often enough to earn your trust, then quietly fails in the situations where accuracy matters most. And by the time evidence finally arrives, the story is already there. The halo is already attached. Which means some people spend years benefiting from a first impression they never earned. And some people spend years fighting one mistake they made on a single day. Not because reality demanded it, because the brain prefers a complete story to an incomplete truth. So, how do you stop the halo effect? You don't. At least, Not completely. Your brain will keep making first impressions. It was designed to. The goal isn't to stop the halo. The goal is to stop obeying it. And the first way to do that is surprisingly simple. Separate the person from the signal, the messenger from the message, the confidence from the content, the delivery from the evidence. Whenever someone gives advice, makes a claim, offers a solution, ask yourself one question. If this exact idea came from someone else, would I still believe it? Not someone impressive, not someone successful, not someone you already trust. Someone ordinary, someone unknown, someone with no halo attached. Would the idea still feel convincing? Most people are surprised by what happens next, because they discover something uncomfortable. Part of the argument's strength was never inside the argument. It was inside the person delivering it. The confidence, the reputation, the status, the image. The halo was doing some of the work. Not all of it, but enough to matter. This doesn't mean distrusting everyone. It means giving ideas a chance to stand on their own. Because a weak idea doesn't become stronger when a charismatic person says it, and a strong idea doesn't become weaker when a quiet person does. The halo effect wants you to evaluate people first. Accuracy often requires doing the opposite. Fix 2. Treat first impressions as hypotheses. The second fix is even stranger. Stop treating first impressions like conclusions. Treat them like hypotheses. Not, this person is trustworthy, but this person might be trustworthy. Not, this person is incompetent, but this person might be incompetent. That single word changes everything. Might. Because is closes the investigation. Might keeps it open. And openness is exactly what the halo effect tries to remove. The next time you notice a strong reaction to someone, positive or negative, pause and ask, what would I need to see to change my mind? Not, how can I prove I'm right? What would change my mind? That question sounds small. It's not. Because most people never ask it. Most people collect confirmation. Very few collect contradiction. The halo effect feeds on confirmation. Every supporting detail makes the story stronger. Every contradiction gets ignored, explained away, minimized. This question interrupts that process. It gives conflicting evidence permission to exist. And that's important because reality is usually mixed. Good people make selfish decisions. Smart people make foolish mistakes. Confident people get things wrong. Insecure people get things right. Real people are inconsistent. The halo effect hates inconsistency. Reality doesn't. People who practice this regularly often describe the same change. They become harder to impress, but they also become harder to deceive. They become slower to judge, but better at understanding. The halo still appears. The first impression still forms. The difference is that it stops becoming the final verdict. It becomes what it should have been from the beginning. A guess, not a conclusion.
Your first impressions aren't the problem. You need them. Every day, your brain is forced to make decisions with incomplete information. Who feels safe? Who deserves attention? Who might be trustworthy? Who might not? You couldn't function if you evaluated every person from absolute zero. So your brain predicts. It guesses. It fills in missing pieces. The halo effect is part of that system, not a flaw, a shortcut. And like most shortcuts, it works often enough to survive. But here's the part that matters. The halo effect isn't really about other people. It's about uncertainty. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable. The brain doesn't like unfinished stories. It doesn't like blank spaces. It doesn't saying, I don't know yet. So when it sees one trait, it invents the rest. Not because it's careless, because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. And that's why the halo effect is so persuasive.
It doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like understanding. It doesn't feel like a story. It feels like reality. But people are rarely that simple. The people you admire, the people you distrust, the people you follow, the people you avoid. Most of them are more complicated than your first impression allowed them to be. Some people spend years benefiting from a halo they never earned.
Some spend years trapped beneath one they never deserved. And most of us have been both: the admired person, the overlooked person, the trusted person, the misunderstood person, sometimes all within the same life. Maybe wisdom isn't learning how to read people perfectly. Maybe that's impossible. Maybe wisdom is something smaller and harder, leaving room for what you don't know yet, leaving room for contradiction.
Leaving room for surprise. Leaving room for people to become more than the story you built about them. Think about someone you trust deeply. Now ask yourself, what do you believe about them that you've never actually tested? And what do you believe about yourself that came from someone else's first impression? Just sit with that. If this changed the way you see people, subscribe. Next video is about a bias that quietly rewrites your memories, not your future, your past, and the strange reason your brain keeps doing it.